Oh my gosh, I'm loving how these bookshelves look on camera, even though I've taken like half of the books off at my level. Hi, I'm stupid, and I didn't realize that the booktube community does a separate December reading wrap-up. I thought that it was just added into the yearly reading recap. Apparently most people do a December reading recap as well, which obviously I didn't do because by the time I realized it would have been the middle of January by the time I got the video up, so I was like, it's fine. I only read 5 books in December, and I only read 5 books this month. I would say 5 books is about average for me. And I'm definitely not slumping, even though like reading is just not my top priority right now. I'm graduating this year, have a full school schedule. My life is just super crazy right now, so reading is obviously just not my top priority. And if you think 5 books is a lot, that's not saying that, I don't know, you've heard the whole spiel about everyone's reading amounts and goals are different, and yeah, that's just me personally. Not harping on you. If you read 1 book a month, that's wonderful. If you read 10 books a month, that's wonderful. Like, whatever you do is amazing. That being said, we are going to start this video off with a December reading recap. We are going to go into January, and then I'm going to give you my February TBR, which I've never done before because I've never had enough books on my physical TBR to have a monthly TBR, but we do. So anyways, let's get started. Actually, I need my folders. I'm actually genuinely literally never prepared when I just sit down and start recording. The first book that I finished in December was Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I feel like I didn't give this book a fair enough shot because this book took me over 2 weeks to read. Again, because I was really busy. It gives everything that everyone says it gives. So you have Peyton and you have Kai. They live in this world with ordinaries and elites. Ordinaries are just regular humans. Elites, they have some type of power, and it's different for every person. Like, there are a whole bunch of different powers. So it's a dystopic fantasy. It's the classic ordinary girl, literally and figuratively, meets Prince and falls in love with Prince, and it's enemies to lovers. You have trials involved, which is very Hunger Games. Specifically, I remember one scene reminded me a lot of Catching Fire and the environment of Catching Fire. I don't remember why I remember that specifically. I gave this book a 4.5 stars. It could have easily been a 5-star had I had more time to really invest in reading it and maybe read it in like a few days. Yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm super excited that I don't have to wait until June or July or whenever Reckless is coming out to read more of this series, because Lauren Roberts announced a novella from Adina, I think is her name, from Adina's point of view. I didn't love her character, but I'm super excited to see where that story goes. The next book I read in December was my very first audiobook, which is One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And I had tried to listen to a different audiobook back when Spotify first released free audiobooks, and it did not work for me. So I was like, oh, audiobooks are just not gonna work, because I was trying to listen to ones that I would rate lower. That was not the right way to start out reading audiobooks. One True Loves was on my metaphorical TBR for probably almost all of 2023. Or no, like the second half, after I read Daisy Jones and the Six, because I fell in love with Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing, at least in Daisy Jones and the Six, and I wanted to see if that carried over. One True Loves is about this lady, and she marries her high school sweetheart. He then dies in a helicopter crash. She moves on like 3 years or something after the helicopter crash. You find out that he is still alive, and that's not a spoiler. That's the entire premise of the book. Like, that's how the book is marketed. It was a really great story, and the guy I thought that I would want her to end up with, I actually ended up changing my mind on who I wanted her to end up with, and she ended up with who I wanted to end up with. Anyways, the writing was beautiful. Had it been a physical book, I totally would have annotated it. Once I'm more financially stable, it will be a book that I will want to put on my bookshelf and probably reread and annotate and all of that. It was just a beautiful love story. I gave it 4.5 stars. The next book that I read was also an audiobook. This was before I realized that Spotify cuts you off after 15 hours if you have the premium membership. And I was super mad because this book literally cut off in the middle of a chapter. Wasn't expecting it at all. And it's a thriller. So I read The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I binged this book in a couple of days, even with it being an audiobook, and then quitting halfway through. I went to go pick up the book from the library that same day, binged it in one sitting. I've heard really mixed reviews on The Only One Left, especially for Riley Sager fans. I've heard Riley Sager fans like other books better. I gave The Only One Left 4.5 stars. I mean, I know it's the best thriller that I read in 2023. It could potentially be the best thriller that I will read for a very long time, and what would be considered a 5-star thriller for me, because there was literally nothing wrong with it. I don't know, I really struggle to rate thrillers 5 stars. So you have this lady, and she gets hired on to be an at-home health nurse for this lady who is paralyzed in her bed, like can't do anything for herself, who lives in this like mansion on a cliff, basically. And the thing is, this lady, Lenora Hope, is accused of murdering her entire family, and it's like a town ghost story, I guess is the word that I'm trying to think of. I literally can't say anything else about that book. But you have so many twists and turns. You can't go more than 30 pages without a plot twist. And each plot twist wasn't outlandish, but it wasn't super predictable, if that makes sense. Like, I was surprised several times. I was like, oh, that makes sense. And I don't know, it was just by far one of the best, if not the best thriller I've ever read. So after my 4.5 stars, I read Betting on You by Lynn Painter. This is a book that I pre-ordered just because Barnes & Noble was running a pre-order sale, and I was like, Better Than the Movies was good. I'll read Betting on You. I don't think Lynn Painter's YA romances are my favorite. I think I'm just not a rom-com person in general. Like, if I'm gonna read a romance, I'd rather read a contemporary romance. You have, what are their names? I don't even remember. It's like Bailey and Charlie. They met in the airport like 4 years ago, and then they meet again. Basically, both of their parents are divorced. Both of them, I think, have like anxiety issues. It's a fake dating trope. I don't remember a lot of this book. I rated it 3.5 stars. It wasn't bad. I do remember thinking like, where are the parents at some points in the book? We ended 2023 on a super high note because I read, if I can pick it up, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I said at the end of my 2023 reading recap that it's the best book that I read of 2023. I definitely will still say it is one of the best books. I think the best book might be Daisy Jones and the Six, for the record. But, so, I'm not going to ramble on about this book because you pretty much know the premise of it. I absolutely loved the military college that they were at. The atmosphere was great. This book is just so over talked about that I really feel like I shouldn't say anything about it at all, because I'm just rehashing what I've heard other people say about it. My personal opinion is I loved it. I wasn't thinking a whole lot about it while I was reading it. I wasn't dissecting it. I was just binging it because I was sick in bed and I had nothing better to do. There's the one point towards the end, during the climax, that makes everyone cry. I was not crying because I was sick. I was so sad. I was so sad. And I thought it wasn't going to happen because it almost happened at one other point in the book. And I was like, oh, it's not going to happen because she wouldn't tease us and then actually do it later, right? I was so sad. Spoiler, skip 5 seconds forward. I still miss it. 5 stars if you can't tell. What is my hand doing? Can you guys see my hand shaking? Anyways, if you can't tell by my gushing over this book, I rated it 5 stars. Okay, I feel like we're moving really, really quickly, but also I feel like we're not moving at all, and also I feel like I'm not saying anything worth hearing. Anyways, overthinking at its finest. So now we're moving into 2024 books. It's crazy that we're in 2024. 1 month is already gone. What? I was still sick, and I was like, I can't let go of these characters yet. So I read Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Was it the smartest idea to go straight from a 5-star read into its sequel and get even more hooked on the characters? Probably not the smartest idea, and that's probably part of the reason that I really, really struggled with the next book that you're going to see me review. But this book, the romance, I agree with what everyone says about the romance not being as good in this book. You're basically fighting the entire time, and it felt really petty and childish, and I've heard some people say that Violet gets really cocky in this book, and I can also see that perspective. I wasn't too bothered by her character. At some points I was obviously like, calm down, Violet, seriously calm down. I can see both her and Xaden's side of their conflict throughout the entire book. It made sense. I don't remember as much of this book. I think this book was a lot more confusing than Fourth Wing, but it also explained a lot of stuff that Fourth Wing didn't get to. I'm super, super, super excited for the third book to come out, supposedly in December. I don't think it has a release date yet. I've heard rumors about it being in December. I have no freaking clue. This book was also amazing. I gave it 4 stars. There were definitely parts where it just felt like it was repeating itself, and it was like, argue, train, argue, train, argue, train, argue, train. And it was just like cycling. Rebecca Yarros killed off a lot of characters. Now the next book that I read, I want to talk a little bit more about, and hopefully it will make more sense than I feel like my yammerings have up to this point. I read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. One of my reading goals this year is to get through ACOTAR, Throne of Glass, and Crescent City. That's a little bit of an ambitious goal now that I'm looking at it in hindsight. I'm at least going to get through ACOTAR for sure. I'd like to at least get through most of Throne of Glass. But at the rate this is going, it'll have to get a little bit better for me to be able to do all of it in 1 year. A Court of Thorns and Roses. I don't hear many people describe the premise of this book to the degree that I would like it to be described. So if you're thinking about reading this book and for some reason you haven't read it yet, like me, like you were late to the game like me, you have this human girl and her family is very, very poor. She is basically the provider for her and her 2 sisters and her father. So she's out hunting in the middle of the woods one day and she kills a wolf. This wolf happens to be fairy. We're gonna say fairy. And the fairy kingdom is basically right next door to her village. Fairies are kind of seen as like these wicked, malicious creatures that hate humans and don't want anything to do with humans and will hurt humans should they ever come in contact with them. When it's discovered that she killed this fairy wolf, another fairy comes to her home and takes her captive and forces her to live in his kingdom in the fairy world. Obviously there's a bigger conflict that you get into throughout the book, but at least for the first half, if not the first like 2/3, this book had no plot. In my opinion, it had no plot. We just had girl kills someone, gets captured, lives in fairyland. Once you get to fairyland, after like 30 pages, there's no plot. Like, so there's 30 pages of the book where you get the conflict of her being trapped in fairyland, and then there's no plot for the majority of her time in fairyland. You don't get into the plot until like 2/3 into the book, which I understand because it's the first book in the series. If you've read Caraval, for some reason this book at least felt kind of like Caraval to me. Like it felt like a fever dream. I wasn't understanding a lot of it. I still need to watch a recap of it. I have not yet. Also, I was really disappointed because the romance that everyone talks about in this series is technically a spoiler for the first book. It's not for the second, which I'll get into later. But the first book, the romance that you hear everyone talk about is unfortunately a spoiler. And I feel like if I hadn't heard about that romance, I would have been more invested in the romance that you get in this book. And I probably wouldn't have been as like, what? Like confused by it. So, I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. I settled on a 4 stars for this book. Upon reading it, I thought I was going to give it 3.5. But I upped it to 4, and after 2 weeks or so, whenever I read this book, I stand by my rating of 4 stars. 4 stars makes the most sense because I can appreciate it for the wonderful writing and where it's going and the world that we're in. I can appreciate it. It's just I'm a plot person. I'm not a character person. So the lack of plot bothered me. This next book I'm going to tell you about, I don't even know what happened while I was reading it. I literally binged it. I picked up The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This book was a 5-star experience. However, I rated it 4.75 stars because I don't remember a lot of it. The premise of this book is you have a lady and her aunt died. So she's inherited her aunt's apartment. But the thing about her aunt's apartment is sometimes it exists 7 years in the past. Outside of the apartment, it's still like the present year, like it's still 2023. But within the apartment, it is 2016. There's this guy who was living there in 2016. It makes more sense once you get into it. Like, her aunt was gone for the summer, so she was leasing her apartment. I didn't understand that when I picked up this book. But yes, there's a guy living in her apartment, and she falls in love with the guy. And you get to see her discover herself and who she is, and kind of deal with this grief that she has over her aunt passing. You get to watch her interact with this guy and fall in love with this guy when she didn't really believe in love. The main guy in this book is a chef. The lady is a book she's a book published. She publicizes. She does public relations for authors, basically. I can't think of the word for it. She's not a book publisher. She's like a book publiciter. Book publiciter, I think, is what I'm trying to say. I loved this book. Absolutely loved this book. I just don't remember a whole lot of it. Please just go read this book. And it also had my heart torn in pieces at parts. Like, the last book that I read in January, I'm not going to talk very much about because I talked about it last year and I just talked about it in my yearly recap. But the sequel to If He Had Been With Me is releasing in less than a week as I'm filming this video. So I reread If He Had Been With Me. I left it at 5 stars because it's a nostalgic read for me. I think if I read this now, I don't think I would rate it 5 stars. But I left it at 5 stars because it's nostalgic. And reading it again, you pick up on all the little signs, and it literally just hurts even more. Now that we've been over all the books that I've read, I want to go very, very quickly into my February TBR. So the book that I'm currently reading, that I've been reading for like a week, is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. I'm 70 pages into it, and before last night, I was 30 pages into it. Again, I haven't had much time to read, and this is one hunk of a book to not be in a reading mood and have to read. However, I think I finally got into it last night. Like, I'm finally invested in the series and in the story. As soon as that one character walked on the page, I was like, okay, I'm here now. I'm here for this. And you can see I'm tabbing. So hopefully this book goes well. But this is obviously on my February TBR. Another book that I have on my TBR is Atomic Habits, which I borrowed from my boyfriend. I want to read this book sporadically. I hope I will finish it in February. I may not, because it's not going to be a book that I probably sit down and read all at once. I'm just in a very productive mindset. I have been since the start of the year. I haven't really had a choice to not be, because again, I'm in the last semester of my senior year. There's so much that I have to organize and get ready. I'm building my own habits, and I've found my own way to build my own habits that works for me. However, I'm sure that there are parts of this that I can learn from, and I don't know. I'm just in a productive mindset, and I kind of want to have a book like this to read. As a brain break in between all of these intense books, I want to read Mary Jane by Jessica Anya Blue. Yeah, this is just a super simple summary type read, and I know it's February. I know it's about to be February. When you're watching this, it is February. I know it's February. But I'm the kind of person who would almost prefer to read a summer read in the winter or in the spring, because I need that pick-me-up. I need the warm weather. I need it to not be below freezing outside in my mind. Hopefully this will be a no-brainer. Easy read in between some more intense books. This is really ambitious of me to try to read A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Wings and Ruin in the same month. They're 2 huge books. And a lot of brainpower books, especially this one. I've heard that this is the politics of ACOTAR. We'll see if I can pick up the pace on my reading a little bit, because the last 2 weeks have been really, really hard for me to read. I might be able to get through both of these in the same month. Wow. That didn't take as long as I thought it would. Hopefully my ramblings made sense. I don't take notes for these videos. I just pick a book up and talk about it. Oh my gosh! I just realized in January, I forgot to talk about my one audiobook that I read. I read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, and I rated it 3.5 stars. I expected it to be a little bit higher, but it wasn't. They're the 2 ladies, and they meet in a restaurant on their 45th birthday. and one of them is a podcaster who interviews women that have drastically changed their lives, and the other one, she claims to be about to drastically change her life. You have no idea what's going on throughout the entire book, and a lot of people are saying that it's not as dark as Then She Was Gone. In my opinion, I don't think it's quite as dark, but it's still very, very dark. You definitely don't guess the plot twist at all like you do with Then She Was Gone, but just because of the darkness of none of this is true, I personally gave it the same rating that I gave Then She Was Gone, which is 3.5 stars, because I'd rather have a twisty thriller than a dark thriller, if that makes sense. It was a good thriller. I liked it better than Then She Was Gone. I just gave it the same rating. So now that that's out of the way, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for 1 year on YouTube as well. I've had multiple different YouTube channels in the past and none of them have been successful. It's only because of you guys that I've actually been semi-successful on this YouTube channel so far. And I hope that we keep growing. Anyways, if you're still here, I really appreciate you and I love you and thank you for watching. And I'm sure I will see you again soon. Bye!